T.F. Riggs High School is proud to be a part of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Funds program, recognizing and honoring our state's fallen heroes, whose names appear on the National Vietnam Veterans Memorial, the Wall, in Washington, D.C. The students participating today are Doug Bouchand, Grant Irwin, Grace Gunderson, Adam Bollinger, Lydia Cans, Sarah Cans, Louis Melhoff, Tessa Myron, Justin Oakland, and Joni Willoughby. The list of South Dakota's fallen heroes was provided by the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund Committee.
Gerald L. Odland, Raymond Alvin Adam, Donald Dean Aldrin, Curtis Lee Anderson, Daniel Leon Anderson, Gerald Franklin Apperson, Dennis Dale Oschenbrenner, Leo Curtis Auckland, Theodore Ellis Baltazar, Larry Elaine Barbie, Jimmy Woodrow Barton, Leo Allen Bauer, Brendan J. Bregan, John Paul Becker, Percy Bettleyoung Jr., John Francis Bibby, William Dennis Beaver, Dean Franklin Bullhouse, Stephen Gregory Boyer, Richard Lee Bresch.
Robert Jan Bridges Jr., Lawrence Dean Brownnutter, Daniel Dean Bussey, Marlon Joseph Callies, Tommy Leon Callies, Roger Slutton Cameron, Edward Harry Case, Alan Dwayne Christensen, Alvin Peter Christensen, Harry J. Coates Jr., Richard Leroy Cummins, Louis James Cunningham, David Warren Cutshall, Gareth John Deal, Ronald Clifford Dexter, Kirby John Doherty, Howard Elmer Drain, Norman Edward Eidsmo, Paul Olin Evans, Samuel Fantle III.
Terry Howard Benanga, Russell Norman Fairding, David Orson Fairstead, Edgar Allen Flowers, Conrad Lee Flyinghorse, Robert Jean Fortin, Lawrence John Froman, Stanley John Frank, Vern Jacob Freed, James Lee Fuchs, Alvy Wayne Gap, David Ray Gatton, Michael Eugene Gerhardt, Ronald Charles Geller, Richard E. Glazeman, Ronald R. Green, Michael Jerome Grunwald, James Francis Hayter, Charles Maury Hallstrom, James Craig Harmon,
Fern Allen Harris, Darrell Elmer Hartman, Theodore Magnus Hadley, Richard Theodore Himes, Peter George Heinzman, David Eugene Hevel, William Leo Hill, Dennis Lee Holm, Mark Roland Horner, Arlen John Hunter, Joseph Emmanuel Herney, John William Hutchinson, Howard Robert Heisel, Michael Meredith Jackson, Robert Milton Jacobs, Kenneth Robert Jamerson, Douglas Duane Jansen, Frank W. Jealous of Him, Ronnie Wayne Johnson.
Roy Albert Johnson, Samuel Joseph Jorgensen, Leland Morris Collar, Curtis James Kopp, Russell William Kaiser, Dale Dean Kenyon, Donnie Raymond Kidd, Eugene William Kimmel, Daniel James Kirkessler, Myron Dale Yellerson, Richard Nicholas Cluse, Dennis Clark Knutson, Donald Dwayne Korb, Lanny Ray Crage, Stephen Mark Custer, Roger Wendell Vanis, Darwin Lynn LeBon, Charles Lane Jr., Charles Thomas Langenfeld,
Gary Alvin Larson, Fred Duane Larson, Marvin Dean Larson, Richard Andrew Larson, Dennis D. Laver, Donald Dean Layton, Doran Dallas LeBeau, Robert Russell Lewis, James Lawrence Lean, Gordon Joseph Lipman, Michael David Marks, Edgar Donald Matthews, Gilbert Lewis Matthews Jr., Richard Ray Menard, John Clark McDowell, Charles D. McGonigal, Ronald Dean McElravy, Dale Richard McInnes, Dennis Craig McPherson,
Mitchell Edward Means, Verlin Gwen Meyer, Mitchell Ronald Mitchells, Charles J. Milbrandt, Richard Lee Miller, Harleen Eugene Millett, Arthur Lee Mills, Richard Dwayne Milton, David Lloyd Morehouse, Leroy Moser, Anton Leonard Mumm, Roger Miller Nelson, Daniel Morris Noldner, Ronald Lee Noldner, Larry Wayne Norgard, Ivan Notebaum, Ronald Andrew Olson, Donald Warren Alilla, Peter Richard Oman,
James Dean Opsahl, Earl John Overacker, William Ernest Pash, Roger Allen Peterson, John Arthur Peterson, James Richard Plate, Roger Lee Porter, Terry Jean Rada, Jesse Milton Redhawk, Ronald Leroy Rail, Robert Vincent Riker, Walter A. Renault, Richard Frederick Renollet, Arden Keith Renville, Orlando Silas Roach, Everett Eugene Robeson, Roy Dean Russell, Donald Raymond Sandvey, Patrick T. Sassa,
Ronald Russell Schnate, Donald Wayne Simonson, Raymond Lee Sipp, David Pecor Soyland, Alvin Richard Spider, Stanley George Sprega, James Lee Steinecke, Lonnie Lee Stern, Wendell Warren Stewart, Dennis Bernard Stockwell, William Dean Sturdivant, Gary Lee Sunday, Stephen John Surma, Gerald Clifford Swayze, Arnold Dean Surovatka, Ronald James Taylor, Arvid Palmer Thermodsgaard, Joseph Lloyd Thorne, Stephen Allen Trant.
Blair William Two Crow, Gabriel Lawrence Two Eagle, Willis Grant Ewells, Ronald R. Van Ragenmorter, Darrell Dean Venenga, Theodore Harold Voigt, Dennis Richard Volk, Curtis Malroy Voss, Lester Arthur Watson, Joseph Louis Whitemouse, Robert Joseph Whites, Richard Allen White, Curtis Leland Williams, Randall Lee Williams, Larry Dean Winterton, James Page Wright, Carlos N. Yellow Elk, Thomas Lee Ziegler, Dennis James Zimprich.